All right. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Definitely.
Today, we're going to be cracking the code, so to speak. We're going to be looking at passwords.
Ooh, passwords. Everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah, well, maybe not everyone's favorite, but definitely something that we all use every single day.
And probably don't think enough about.
Exactly. And to help us kind of go beyond those password basics, we're going to be looking at an excerpt from A Hacker's Guide to Password Cracking.
Sounds a lot intimidating.
A little bit, right. But, I mean, isn't that the point of these deep dives? To kind of like peek behind the curtain a little bit, see how things actually work?
Yeah, I like that. Behind the scenes of cybersecurity.
Exactly. And specifically, how these hackers are able to crack these passwords that we hopefully are putting a lot of thought into.
Well, that's the thing, right? Sometimes we put a lot of thought into it, sometimes maybe not so much.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a perfect segue because this guide jumps right into the human element of this. It's not just about the tech, it's about how we as humans tend to behave. And they have this section called Analysis of the Worst Passwords. And honestly, looking through it, it's a little bit embarrassing.
Oh, I bet. What are some of the highlights? Or should I say lowlights?
Yeah, the lowlights. So, we see the classics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, password. Literally the word password, QWERTY.
It's like people are asking to get hacked.
Right. You would think that by now people would know better, but
I think it goes back to that idea of convenience, right?
yeah.
Strong passwords, they're hard to remember.
Yeah,
And we're busy, we got a lot going on, so we take those shortcuts.
absolutely. And you know what? Hackers know that. They know we're going to take those shortcuts.
They're counting on it.
Exactly.
So it's almost like they're not just relying on brute force computing power, they're also relying on our laziness.
Yeah, laziness, our predictability.
Right. We're predictable creatures of habit.
Exactly. And this guide even points out that, like, these simple passwords, the ones that we think are clever because we swapped a 1 for an L or something, those can be cracked in seconds. Seconds, using the right tools.
Wow. So it's not even about how fast a computer can run through combinations. It's about, like you said, how predictable we are.
Exactly. And speaking of those tools, this guide talks about two main methods,
Sure.
brute force attacks and dictionary attacks. Can you break those down a little bit for us?
Sure. So imagine a brute force attack like trying every single key on a giant key ring.
Okay.
It's going to take a while, it's slow, it's methodical, but eventually you're going to find the right key, right?
You'll get there.
And that's essentially what a brute force attack is, just on a much larger scale. These computers are running through millions, billions of combinations per second. So they're short, simple passwords.
Toast.
Toast.
Okay, so brute force is just kind of like relentless trial and error, but what about these dictionary attacks? What are those all about?
Yeah. So dictionary attacks are a little bit more targeted. They're not just randomly trying every single combination. They're using lists of common words, phrases, maybe even passwords that have been leaked in previous data breaches.
Oh, so they're working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. So if your password is let me or something like summer 2023 with an exclamation point at the end, you're probably on one of those lists. So even if we think we're being clever, if it's something that a lot of other people might use, we're still at risk.
Definitely. And that actually leads into another important point, that the guide makes the danger of password reuse. If you're using that same password for multiple accounts.
Oh, yeah.
So let's say, hypothetically, your online shopping account gets hacked. Now, if you use that same password for your email or your social media, or even worse, your bank account.
Oh, no. It's
You-
like giving them a master key to your entire life. Exactly. And that's where this concept of credential stuffing comes in. They take these big lists of leaked passwords and they just try them across all these different platforms. It's completely automated, it's efficient, and unfortunately, it's very effective.
So what I'm hearing is unique passwords for every account, no exceptions. But how are we supposed to remember all of those? My brain is already hurting just thinking about it.
Well, the guide actually has a solution for that. It suggests moving beyond traditional passwords and using something called passphrases instead.
Okay, passphrases. I like the sound of that. What are those?
So think of a passphrase like a string of words like hardwood llama spacecraft, for example.
Hardwood llama spacecraft. All right, I'm intrigued.
Right. It's memorable, it's weird.
It's definitely weird. I like it.
And because it's not a single word that's in a dictionary, it's much harder to crack using those brute force or those dictionary attacks that we talked about.
Okay, so longer, weirder, more random is better. Got it. But what makes those passphrases so much more effective?
It all comes down to something called entropy. The more random and unpredictable your password is, the harder it is to crack.
I see. So with a passphrase, the number of possible combinations just explodes, right?
Exact.
Okay, so we've got passphrases. Anything else we can do to kind of beef up our security here?
Well, the guide also talks about something called identity proofing.
Okay, identity proofing. That sounds pretty serious. What is that?
So it's essentially an extra layer of security. It's verifying your identity through a secondary method. Like, you know how you get those codes sent to your phone or your email?
Yeah, yeah.
So even if someone did manage to crack your passphrase, they would still need to jump through another hoop to get into your account.
Oh, I see. So it's like having a double lock on your door.
Exactly.
I like it. I'm starting to feel a little bit more secure already, but I know we're just scratching the surface here. What else does this hacker's guide have in store for us?
Well, it actually dives into some of the tools and techniques that organizations are using. So not just what we can do as individuals, but how companies are trying to stay ahead of the hackers.
Okay, so it's like a corporate level cybersecurity battle going on.
Exactly. And it's getting pretty sophisticated. We'll talk about all that when we come back.
All right, so we've talked about what we as individuals can do to kind of up our password game. But what about organizations? Like, are they just hoping for the best when it comes to their employees' passwords?
Well, it's definitely not just a matter of hoping for the best anymore. This guide actually talks about some really interesting tools and strategies that companies are using these days.
Okay, good. Because I feel like, businesses are probably a prime target for these hackers.
Absolutely. There's a lot more at stake, right?
Right.
So one of the things that the guide mentions is something called SpeakOps password policy.
SpeakOps password policy. Okay, what is that? Is that like some kind of super strict rule book for passwords?
It's more than just a rule book. It's actually a software solution. Right. And what it does is it allows companies to really customize and enforce their password policies. So, all those things we talked about, like minimum length, complexity requirements, even banning those commonly used passwords.
Right.
This tool helps organizations actually implement all of that.
Okay, so it's not just about setting the rules, it's about making sure people actually follow them.
Exactly. And it even goes beyond just those basic requirements. Like it can actually tap into information about data breaches and leach passwords.
Oh, wow.
So it can actually prevent employees from using credentials that are already compromised.
Wait, so it's like this software has a direct line to like the dark web or something, knowing what passwords hackers already have.
In a way, yes. I mean, it leverages information about known compromised passwords. It's constantly updating its database, so it's really trying to stay ahead of the curve.
That's pretty impressive. It's like having a security guard that can see into the future.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But this kind of software, it's not just for like giant corporations.
No, you're right. This particular tool, it's definitely geared towards those enterprise-level solutions, but the principles behind it, they really apply to everyone.
Right.
It highlights the importance of that continuous monitoring and those proactive security measures.
So even if we're not using this specific software, we should be thinking about how to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got strong passwords, we've got these like incredible tools that can enforce policies and like scan for vulnerabilities. What else is out there?
Well, the guide also dives into this concept of continuous scanning.
Continuous scanning. Okay, now we're really getting to the spy stuff. What is that?
So it's basically like a digital metal detector for weak passwords, kind of like you said.
Okay, I'm liking this analogy.
And it involves regularly scanning systems, specifically something called Active Directory.
Okay, back up a second. What is Active Directory? I'm not familiar with that.
So Active Directory, it's essentially a central directory, like a database, and that's where organizations store information about users, computers, network resources.
Okay.
And importantly, it often contains password information.
Ah, okay. So this continuous scanning is like checking that directory for any passwords that might be weak or have been compromised.
Exactly. And the scale of this scanning is pretty incredible. The guide mentions that these tools can check against databases of billions of known compromised passwords.
Billions.
Billions.
That's crazy. But where do they even get that information? Like, how do they know all those compromised passwords?
Well, data breaches, unfortunately, are happening all the time.
Right.
And when that happens, those lists of stolen credentials, they often end up online. Sometimes they're sold on the dark web. And these security tools, they basically tap into that information. They're constantly updating their databases to try and stay one step ahead.
So it's like this constant arms race. But instead of weapons, it's information. It's like the good guys trying to gather as much data as possible to defend against the bad guys.
Yeah, That's a great way to put it. And it really highlights why staying informed about cybersecurity is so crucial.
Hmm.
It's a constantly evolving landscape, and we need to make sure we're adapting our strategies accordingly.
So we've got strong passwords, we've got these amazing tools that can enforce policies and scan for vulnerabilities. But I got to ask, what about the human element? Like,
Right.
can any software truly account for, human error and those moments of forgetfulness or carelessness?
You bring up a really important point. Technology can provide the framework, the tools,
Right.
but ultimately security comes down to people.
So it's not just about the tech, it's about educating users and like fostering a culture of security awareness.
Exactly. And that's something that we'll actually explore further when we come back. We'll delve into the psychology of cybersecurity and see how understanding our own vulnerabilities is actually be the key to building a truly resilient defense.
All right, so we've talked about some pretty sophisticated tools and techniques for, keeping those passwords safe. But like you said, it all really comes back to us,
Hmm.
the users.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're the ones who are creating those passwords, managing those accounts.
Right. It's almost like we're the weakest link in the chain.
In a way, yes. But that also means we have the power to strengthen that link.
Okay, I like that.
The guide really emphasizes the importance of understanding um, hacker psychology.
Oh, interesting.
Not that we want to become hackers ourselves,
Oh,
but
yeah.
if we can anticipate their moves, we can be better prepared.
So it's like playing chess, trying to think a few steps ahead of your opponent.
Exactly. And hackers, they often look for the path of least resistance.
Okay.
They want those easy targets. So if we can make ourselves less appealing targets, we're already making their jobs a lot harder.
Okay, I like that approach. So how do we do that? How do we think like a hacker without actually becoming one?
Well, it starts with awareness, right? Being conscious of the information that we're sharing online and how it could potentially be used against us.
Okay, so like being careful about what we post on social media and things like that.
Exactly. Think about your social media profiles, for example. Do you have your birthday, your pet's name, your mother's maiden name publicly visible?
Oh, yeah.
All of those things, those are often used as security questions.
Right, right.
So a hacker could easily gather that information and use it to, reset your password or gain access to your account.
So it's not just about like creating strong passwords. It's about protecting the information that could be used to bypass those passwords.
Exactly. And this awareness also extends to our online behavior.
Okay.
The guide warns against clicking on suspicious links or opening attachments from senders that you don't recognize.
Right, those phishing scams.
Yeah, those phishing scams, they can be very convincing.
They really can. It's amazing how like they look like they're really from your bank or a store that you shop at.
Yeah, hackers are getting really sophisticated with their social engineering tactics. They know how to, prey on our trust and our desire for convenience. So it's always a good idea to double check that sender's address, look for any misspellings or grammatical errors, and never, ever give out sensitive information unless you're absolutely sure you're on a legitimate website.
So it's about, taking that extra moment to verify before we click or share anything.
Exactly. Be skeptical, be cautious.
Okay. Any other like hacker thinking tips?
Well, I think another important aspect of this mindset is understanding their tools and techniques.
Okay.
We've already talked about brute force and dictionary attacks, but the guide also mentions something called rainbow tables. Have you ever heard of those?
Rainbow tables? No, I don't think so. What are those?
So essentially, they're pre-computed tables that store hashes of common passwords. And it's a way for hackers to quickly crack passwords without having to go through that entire brute force process.
Okay, so that sounds pretty complicated. But the main takeaway is that even strong passwords can be vulnerable if hackers are using these, more advanced techniques.
Right. And that's why it's so important to, stay informed about those latest cybersecurity threats, those best practices. The guide recommends using a password manager
Okay, yeah.
to generate and store strong, unique passwords for all your accounts.
Yeah, password managers, I think those are becoming more and more popular.
They are, and for good reason.
Right, because it takes that burden off of us to remember all those crazy passwords.
Exactly. And a lot of them have those built-in security features like two-factor authentication.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of two-factor authentication, that's another crucial step we could take.
Absolutely. It adds that extra layer of protection. So even if a hacker manages to steal your password, they still can't get into your account without that second factor.
It's like that double lock on the door, right?
Exactly. And the guide highlights that So many online services now offer two-factor authentication, so there's really no excuse not to use it.
All right. This is all great advice, but I got to admit, it can feel a little overwhelming at
I
times.
understand.
It's like, there are so many potential threats out there. How can we possibly stay ahead of them all?
Yeah, you're right. It's a constant battle. But I think the key is to focus on the things that we can control.
Okay.
We can choose strong passwords, we can enable two-factor authentication, we can be mindful of our online behavior, and we can stay informed about the latest security threats.
So it's not about being paranoid. It's about being proactive and taking those steps to, minimize our risk.
Exactly. And remember, security is a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
There will always be new challenges, but by staying vigilant and adapting our strategies, we can make ourselves much harder targets.
Well, that's some great advice. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of password cracking, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the psychology of weak passwords to the sophisticated tools that hackers use. But ultimately, I think the most important takeaway is that knowledge is power. By understanding the threats and taking those simple but crucial steps to protect ourselves, we can all become more resilient in this digital age.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Security, it's not just about protecting our data. It's about protecting our privacy, our finances, our peace of mind. It's worth taking the time to do it right.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe out there and keep those passwords strong.